Hello, the purpose of this video is to help anyone struggling with the Module 7 homework, the problems that are asking you to figure out like what X score or Z score or the mean or standard deviation are without any formulas and just using the logic of the normal distribution. So for this one, it really is to help you think about what the normal distribution is telling us and how we fit numbers into them. So I don't want you to use formulas on those certain problems like 10 and 12 and 24 on the homework assignment. I really just want you to logic it out. So how do you do that? Well, we know that in any normal distribution or population distribution, the scores of the mean of the scores is always equal to 0 with a standard deviation of 1. And so we can map that out here as we see here. So this represents some mean value. And then each of these is a deviation score, right? So here's where one standard deviation of the population would fall. Here's where two standard deviations from the mean of the population would fall. Here's where one standard deviation below the mean of the population would fall. And here's where two standard deviations below the mean of a population would fall. Okay, so that's the logic of it. Now, what if you have a question where it's telling you that the mean of the distribution is 50 and the standard deviation is 6? Well, now what? Well, we can use that information to get z-scores and x-scores, and we can even reverse it back. If we've given an x-score, we can use that x-score to figure out the mean or the standard deviation, given that we know some values. So how do we do that? Well, to figure out any of these solutions, what you want to do is put the 50 where the mean is, and then use the value of 6 for every standard deviation value. So if the curve is telling you to add one standard deviation, you would add 6 to whatever value the mean is. Let's see how that might look. So my mean is 50. My one standard deviation above the mean is going to be 50 plus 6, or an x score of 56. How about two standard deviations above the mean? The value that should go right here. Think about that for a second. For that, I want to add 6 or times 2 standard deviations to the mean to get the value of, if you were thinking 62, you are correct. Now, what's the x score, the value for a score one standard deviation below the mean? I'm looking down here now to get that. One standard deviation is 6. One standard deviation below the mean, I want to subtract 6 from 50, and I get a value of 44. Two standard deviations below, I want to subtract 12 from 50, right? Two standard deviations, or 2 times 6, and my value there should be 38. Easy, right? Well, what happens when the question's asking you about half ranges, right? Like, what if I'm trying to solve for a score that's like a plus 1.5 or a negative 0.5? So to do these half z values, like what the 0.5 means is that you are looking at half of a standard deviation. So if your mean is 50 and your standard deviation is 6, use 50 as the value for the mean and add and subtract 6 for every whole deviation point, but only 3 if for every half point. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, let's say my mean is 50 and I want to go 1/2 standard deviation above the mean, or z positive 0.5. So here's where the z positive 0.5 would fall. What value would go in here, or what score? It'd be a half a standard deviation, so half of 6. If you're thinking 53, you are correct. Now, how about 1.5 standard deviations above the mean? Well, If you're thinking you're going to have to add the 6, right, for the 1 standard deviation, and then 3 more above that, your value here should be 59. Going below, a half standard deviation below, I subtract a half a standard deviation or half a 6 to get 47 here. 1.5 standard deviations below, I subtract 1.5 standard deviations to get 41. So hopefully that helps to clarify those problems for you. But as always, if you have any questions, let me know.